Welcome back to the GCN Racing News Show. Coming up this week, Tadej Pogacar begins 2020 just as he finished in 2019. We're going to take a closer look at his incredible climbing performances at the Volta Valenciana. We've also got the Saudi Tour, Étoile de Bessèges, the Rock Cobbler, the Dutch National Headwind Championships, and the first win for Wout Van Aert since he crashed out of the Tour last year. We shall start though with the Volta Valenciana, which saw many pros making their debut for the 2020 season. Amongst them, two Dutch sprinters, Dylan Groenewegen and Fabio Jacobsen. They shared the sprint spoils between them, Groenewegen taking stages 1 and 3, Jacobsen the final day of the race. Groenewegen's win on stage 3, in fact, was his 50th victory for Team Jumbo-Visma. It was stages 2 and 4 though that would define the overall classification. Both of them won by the very same man. The first of those stages finished on the short but very punchy climb to Cullera. It seemed made for Alejandro Valverde, and in fact it would have been but for the efforts of Tadej Pogacar, who out-Valverded Valverde on a Valverde-esque climb, coming around him just before the finish line. It was very interesting, in fact, to look at the power required on those final slopes. Jack Haig of Mitchelton Scott, who finished 5th on the stage at the same time as Pogacar, averaged 508 watts for 5 minutes and 10 seconds up that final climb. So, at 70 kilograms, that's a power-to-weight ratio of 7.3 watts per kilogram. Ouch. It was Haig that took the leader's jersey into the decisive 4th stage to Altea, but there was nothing that he or anybody else could do against the might of Pogacar. The Slovenian attacked on the steepest part of that final climb with around 2 kilometres remaining and would never be caught. Wout Poels, now riding for Bahrain McLaren, getting the closest, with Theo Gegenhardt in 3rd place on the day. This analysis from Philip Diegner of Dig Deep Coaching is really insightful. Pogacar, roughly 66 kilograms, averaged 278 watts for the stage and a whopping 422 watts for the final 18.5 minute climb, which is almost 6.5 watts per kilogram. For his attack on the steep part of the climb, he spent 2 minutes at 474 watts. No wonder nobody else is able or willing to go with him. And so, at 21 years and 5 months, Tadej Pogacar becomes one of the youngest riders ever to win this race. The only rider younger than him was the French rider Bruno Cornier back in 1984. It's also now been a full year since Pogacar took part in a stage race and didn't win the youth classification. Now, considering he will be eligible to win the young rider's jersey for another 4 years, it certainly won't be his last. And you wonder what's next for him. I certainly can't wait to see. The current crop of young riders are just so talented that anyone over the age of 25 might not get a look in at the major races. Bernal versus Pogacar versus Roglic at the Tour de France. That could be quite the battle, couldn't it? In the women's one-day race, it was Marta Bastianelli who sprinted to the victory. The Italian was one of the most successful riders of the 2019 season, and she got her 2020 campaign off to an equally successful start. She won that one-day race ahead of the new Movistar signing Barbara Guarcieri, while a big shout-out must go to neo-pro Tenniel Campbell from Trinidad and Tobago, who gave her Valcar Travel and Service team a sign of things to come with her first podium of the year. Before we move on, a quick update for you all on what's coming up on the GCN Racing channel this week. And some exciting news. We have got exclusive live coverage of the Tour de la Provence starting this Thursday. That will be available in Europe, the USA, New Zealand and Asia, except for Japan. And it's looking like it's going to be a fantastic race. There are 13 World Tour teams taking part, and one of the stages is set to finish up Mont Ventoux, at least up to Chalet Reynard. Now, amongst the favourites for that stage and the GC will be Nairo Quintana and Warren Barguil, Pavel Sivakov, Sepp Kuss and Hugh Carthy. Bigger news than all of that though is that we will have a special guest appearance in the commentary box on Thursday and Friday, Bernie Eisel, which I'm very much looking forward to. We're also going to have the next rounds of the Ethias Cross and Super Prestige series this coming Saturday and Sunday respectively. So I hope you'll join us for as much of that as possible. Moving on, the summer season of pro bike racing down under concluded last week with the men's and women's Herald Sun Tours. Crosswind split the field on the first stage of the women's race, Arlena Sierra of Astana outsprinting the rest of the 20-rider front group to take the victory there. The second and final stage though finished up Falls Creek, and it marked the first pro victory for Ella Harris of Canyon SRAM. She bettered the young sensation that is Sarah Gigante on the stage. Third place on the stage was also enough for Lucy Kennedy to take the overall general classification. Now that win for Harris was also the first pro victory for a winner of the Zwift Academy, which Harris took a couple of years back. And understandably, she was really quite emotional after the finish line.
I got there as soon as I crossed the line, and I've never been able to salute before, so I had no idea what to do, and my friends are probably teasing me right now, but I'm just, so excited.
Great stuff. Well done, Ella. In the men's race, Stage 1 marked Alberto Dainesi's first victory as a pro rider. He outsprinted former teammate and another up-and-coming sprinter, Caden Groves, who in turn would get his own back on Stages 3 and 5, taking the wins there. Amazingly, Nick White had ridden the last 100 Ks of Stage 1 with a collapsed lung and broken ribs, which he sustained in a crash. Goodness only knows how he managed to do that. Get well soon, Nick, another former Zwift Academy finalist. Jai Hindley won both of the race's summit finishes at Falls Creek and Mount Buller, and with those, the overall victory too, making it a very successful week in fact for Team Sunweb, who won 3 of the 5 stages. Make a note though of the name Seb Boric. He finished a close second to Hindley on both of those stages and looked brilliant on them, I have to say. He is only 20 years old, he's one of the St George Continental team, and after a tough season spent in Europe last year with the AG2R development squad, I think this will give him some renewed confidence. Meanwhile, it was Bahrain McLaren who took the spoils at the inaugural Saudi Tour last week, but perhaps not with the sprinter that you would expect. Mark Cavendish will be on lead-out duties for the German rider Phil Bauhaus, although it is less of a lead-out for the first stage victory of the race and more of a tactical slowing that allowed the German to take the win. Cavendish just here letting the wheel go and giving Bauhaus the space he needed over the rest of the sprinters in the field. Great to see Cav back in action though, and here's an interview that Eurosport did with him at the race.
What makes cycling beautiful is the variables involved, you know. No race is the same. It's not just us on the road. There's 100, 200 other bike riders on the road, so things can change and you have to be able to adapt. And I think if you can understand each other, if you get on well, if you're riding as friends and not just teammates, and that's the most important thing. And like I said before, it makes me incredibly happy that we're like that here. You know, we spend a lot of time sat at the dinner table after we finish dinner, talking, joking, laughing, and for me that's the best bonding to translate into a sprint finish.
On stage 4, Nasser Bouhanni took his first win since he bagged a stage of the Vuelta a España in September of 2018. It's a long time to go without a win as a sprinter, and just what he needed, having just started with his new team Arkea Samsic. And it was he, in fact, who led the race going into the final stage. A brilliant lead out though from Bahrain McLaren saw them deliver Bauhaus to his second stage victory and the overall honours, courtesy of the bonus seconds that he picked up on the line. Bouhanni was not happy though. He was gesticulating furiously as he thought Bauhaus had deviated from his line. However, after analysing the sprint, the jury let the results stand. This is the first time that Phil Bauhaus has ever won a stage race. In fact, he's never even come close before. His previous best GC performance came at the 2017 Tour of Denmark, with 31st place overall. Our friends at Eurosport again spoke to him after the finish.
Phil, first of all, a word on that sprint. That was pretty hectic. Take us through those that final kilometer.
Yeah, I mean there was the U-turn, like 1.5 to go. From then on, we started. Well, we went from the front, and yeah, I know did the last into the last 500 meters, and then from then on it was Kev who did the lead out for me. What means to me also really a lot if the world's best sprinter and former world champion do the lead out for me.
It wasn't all plain sailing for the Bahrain McLaren team though. Here is Bauhaus stopping for a puncture. Here's his mechanic coming with a spare wheel. And here is team principal Rod Allingworth taking the good wheel back to the car. And to think he used to be the performance director at Team Sky. I mean, you had one job, Rod. Although in fact in that situation I'm not even sure if there was one job for you to do. Meanwhile, back in Europe, we also had the 5-day Étoile de Bessèges in the south of France. The first stage there was won by 21-year-old Alexis Brunel, his first pro victory and his second day of professional racing, having made the step up to the World Tour with Groupama FDJ this year. Team boss Marc Madio obviously likes to make this race an early season priority, as it's the 8th edition of the last 10 in which they've won at least one stage. Now, we've all heard of the curse of the rainbow jersey. However, there is a lesser known curse which is called the Malédiction de la Marseillaise, where the story goes that the winner of the Grand Prix Cycliste de la Marseillaise will have a terrible remainder of the season because they've obviously peaked far too early. That doesn't look to be the case this year though, as Benoit Cunninfroy is now the winner of that and Bessèges. He took the race lead on stage 4, finishing behind NTT's Ben O'Connor, and managed to defend it onto the final day's time trial. Cunninfroy is only the second rider to achieve that particular double since Eddie Plancart did it in 1984. That final time trial, incidentally, was won by last year's Tour of Flanders winner Alberto Bettiol, and it's been a great start to the season for EF Education First, who also took stage 2 with new signing Magnus Cort. And it's also been a very promising start to the year for Team NTT, who had a tough one in 2019. In fact, they've already got more than halfway to last year's win tally. On top of O'Connor's win in Bessèges and Nizzolo's Down Under, they also won stage 3 of the Tour de Langkawi a couple of days back in a sprint with Max Walscheid, and then they claimed the South African National Road Championships title, Ryan Gibbons managing to take the jersey away from Daryl Impey, who finished second on the day. Ashley Moolman-Pasio won the women's time trial title for the 5th time and the road race for the 6th time in her career, whilst Daryl Impey will still be seen in national champs colours this year. A few days previous he'd won the time trial title for the 8th time in a row and the 9th time in his career. Right, so we're going to move over to cyclocross now and the final round of the DVV Trophy from Lille. It became a day of firsts, so having taken the rainbow jersey a week ago in Switzerland, Ceylin del Carmen Alvarado took her first overall Elite Series victory by outsprinting Anne-Marie Worst for the second race in a row. Worst, you could say, had definitely got the measure of Alvarado in out-and-out sprints this season, but not for the past 2 races. Alvarado did get clear early on, only to go down in the sand, which allowed Worst to come back to her. But Alvarado's ride was her 5th victory out of 8 in the DVV series, and her overall margin, in a series which is an accumulative time rather than points, was 2 minutes and 16 seconds over Worst. No such thing as the curse of the rainbow jersey there. Big respect though has to go to 777's Yara Castelline, who started the race despite having fractured her 4th and 5th vertebrae in a race last Wednesday. She defended her 3rd spot overall. Had she not ridden, she would have been penalised 5 minutes and slipped down the overall classification. The men's race was one of the best of the entire season. First up, it was Laurens Sweeck who got a gap, only to stack it in the sand and be passed by Quinten Hermans. However, it was Wout Van Aert in that yellow jersey of Jumbo-Visma who was powering through the field, having had a less than favourable grid position. He was looking like the Wout of old. Marty, commentating live, called the winner very early on in this one, and once Van Aert had hit the front, he never looked back. It was an emotional day for the man whose career was threatened by that horror crash at the Tour de France last year. The questions were answered as to whether he could come back to his best, whilst he banged his leg before sitting up to salute. The answer was a resounding yes. That was his first cyclocross victory, in fact, since the Pontchâteau World Cup in January of 2019. Non-starter on the day, Mathieu van der Poel was the closest challenger to series leader Elie Iserbyt. The Powell Sauzon rider could only manage 11th on the day, but won the series from Michael van Turenhout by a full 5 minutes and 19 seconds. Unfortunately though, extreme weather on Sunday led to the cancellation of the Super Prestige race, which was due to take place in Merckxplas. Now, in other news, world champion Mads Pedersen has signed a contract extension with his team Trek Segafredo, which will keep him there up to the end of 2022. It was also announced that he is due to make his Tour de France debut this summer. That's quite unusual for a rider to be wearing the rainbow jersey when they make their Tour de France debut. He'll be just the 5th rider, in fact, to do so, after Ercole Baldini, Rick Van Looy, Greg LeMond and Oscar Freire. Not bad company to keep. Now, we're not even halfway through February yet, and already 16 of the 19 men's World Tour teams have at least won one race. The 3 teams still waiting to get on the score sheet in 2020 are CCC, Astana and Team Ineos. And it's actually the furthest that Team Ineos have gone in a season without clocking up at least one win since they first took up cycling in 2010. They've always had at least one win by now, although you'd imagine that will be rectified very soon, with Egan Bernal and Richard Carapaz taking part in the Tour Columbia 2.1, which starts tomorrow. The Tour of Flanders route for 2020 has been announced. It will start, as it has done for the last couple of years, in Antwerp and finish in Oudenaarde. It takes in 3 ascents of the Quaremont, which also marks the first climb of the day, 1 ascent of the Muur van Gerardsbergen and 2 of the Paterberg, which is also the final climb of the day. Julien Alaphilippe will make his debut at the race this year, and with Van der Poel, Van Aert and the usual cobbled specialists taking part, it's sure to be a good one. In fact, I'm already salivating at the prospect of it. Too much information there, I know. Speaking of Van der Poel, he has become the first rider ever to be in the top 10 of the mountain bike, cyclocross and road UCI rankings at the same time. This according to La Flamme Rouge over on Twitter. We don't really need any more evidence of his versatility, do we? But there it is for you in black and white. We also, unfortunately last week, had a reminder of just how brutal road cycling is, with a whole host of crashes and broken bones in the races. Tobias Foss, last year's Tour de l'Avenir winner, crashed just 2 days into his pro career with Jumbo-Visma at the Volta Valenciana, breaking his collarbone in the process. The Frenchman Tony Galopin of Algi d'Huez broke his wrist in a crash at the very same race, and there was another broken collarbone in the Étoile de Bessèges for Sebastian Langeveld, the classic star from EF Education First. Meanwhile, Matteo Moschetti of Trek Segafredo, who had a brilliant start to the season, winning 2 races in Mallorca, sustained an acetabular fracture and a dislocation of the right femur in Bessèges, which unfortunately will require a long period of recovery. We wish everyone all the best in making a return to full health sooner rather than later. For some more positive news, Rory Sutherland, who fractured his femur in an accident at the Israel Startup Nations team get-together a few weeks back, is back on his bike. Here he is on an indoor trainer. Rory celebrated his 38th birthday on Friday, and I'm sure being back on his bike is one of the best presents that he could have wished for. And finally, for a couple of things that are a little bit different. First up, we've got the Rock Cobbler in Bakersfield, California. Now this is an event that we have featured here before on GCN Racing, and one that is described by the organisation as a stupidly hard ride bordering on a race. The ride/race began at a museum. Riders did a lap on a racing kart track, tackled a 100-metre hiker bike, and after 85 miles and over 8,000 feet of elevation gain, finished with a lap of a BMX track. And to top it all off, there was an after party at the museum to end the day. First man home on the day was Philip Tintzman in a time of 5 hours and 21 seconds, followed by mountain bike legend Tinka Juarez in second, whilst it was Jessica Kerrer of Coureur Group Racing who was first home in the women's in 6 hours and 2 seconds. Looking slightly less fun was the Dutch Headwind Championships. Again, this is something we've featured here before on GCN Racing, but if you're not aware, this is a race that has no fixed date. The organisation have to wait for a suitably windy day to arrive, and with Storm Ciara hitting Northern Europe at the weekend, they decided it was prime time. Except the wind became too strong even for this event, with the organisers having to call it off after 250 of the 300 entrants had finished. Participants have to use traditional Dutch town bikes to battle into the winds in what looks like a slow motion race. It's tough. So tough that there's a vomit area set up at the finish where you can slump over a set of handlebars and retch to your heart's content. One for the bucket list, I think, or the six-sack list in this instance. Now, despite not everybody getting to compete, Max de Jong was deemed the winner of the men's event for the second year in succession, whilst Lisa Chenard also defended her title over in the women's. Don't forget to get in touch with us if you've got an alternative event that you think deserves some exposure here on the Racing News Show, because we do love to show something that's a little bit different to the norm. Right, that is all for this week's show. Don't forget to tune in for our live racing over the forthcoming week. And if you've enjoyed this video, please click on the thumbs up icon, which you'll find just down below.